Yeah. So I'm not really good at this. So take turns or tag team, whatever you want to do. But tell us who you are and what you find yourself doing these days. And then if you want, how you came across my work and what you want to get out of today.
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, just like an overview would be, like you said, introduction, like who are we? Why is there two of us? What's our story? And then, why did we think that this would be useful for your listeners? So I'll start. I'm Martha Wright. With me is my sister-in-law and best friend, Kristy Wright. She's also my Anam Cara. In Irish Gaelic, that means soul sister, basically, heart friend. It's reserved as like, the top echelon of friend. And we met the first day of college. I was so nervous and weird and awkward, and I came in and asked if anyone had milk to drink. And why would anyone want milk on like a 94-degree day in the mountains of Virginia, moving into a college dorm on the third floor? Kristy was like, "Who is she?" And no, thank you. I'll have a no, thank you helping. But within the end of the day, she was like, "Actually, no, I think we'll be all right." And I'll let Kristy share her story too. But so we knew each other in college. We could feel this pull from spirit to connect. So we did a Bible study group, just the two of us. And then we graduated, we went our separate ways, but still remained best friends. And again, like I said, I'll let Kristy share her path. But around my quarter life crisis, as I lovingly call it, I had this complete just crash. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I was so depressed and I was just not in a good place. And her mother actually did a Reiki session on me. And for anyone who doesn't know what Reiki is, Reiki actually breaks down to be God's energy. That's what the word means. Rei, God, ki, or chi, energy, is Japanese. And that moment changed my life. There was a moment specifically in that session where my inner wildness burst out of me, this version of me that was screaming to be my authentic soul self, but didn't know how to be my authentic soul self. And so that set me on a trajectory of learning, of becoming a Reiki master teacher, of exploring some new ageisms that didn't really feel right. As I say, it's kind of like wearing the wrong pair of shoes. And then around my early 30s, I got the call to shamanism. I was facing some really overwhelming friendships that were asking too much of me at the time that my son was like 2 or 3 and wasn't sleeping, hadn't slept in years. And I was just exhausted and I broke down and I kept getting chronically sick in my throat, which of course is for anyone who knows energy work and knows chakras, that's going to be the place of honesty. I wasn't being honest with myself and I wasn't being honest with my friends about what I was capable to hold and not hold. And so that broke me open. And I remember saying, at one point I was just at my desk and I sat down and I just earnestly prayed. I was just like, tell me why? What is going on? Why do I keep getting sick? The doctors are talking about surgery and cutting me off from medication for like antibiotics. I was like, what is happening?
Mhm.
And I heard you need to become a shaman. And I looked around. Surely someone was in the room with me. No one was there, but I heard it clear as day. And so I Googled it and I was like, oh my gosh, my whole body lit on fire from all these times when I was a kid and young adult that I felt this call from spirit, but this was it. This was relationship with God, with God energy, but rooted in the earth. And that's really what shamanism is. And it's about being in relationship with the non-ordinary or unseen worlds as it best supports our human experience in our community. And so that led me to a deep dive with core shamanism and Egyptian mystery schools, and then going into the path of becoming a Keening woman or Ban Keensha in the Irish lineage with my Scottish and Irish heritage, which I love. But what brings me back to this podcast, and I'm going to kick it off to Kristy after this, is that somewhere along the way, I thought if I'm in relationship with energy and spirit in these facets, then obviously I can't be a Christian woman. And I found myself being like, well, peace out, Jesus. I guess like you don't love me because I left you. So whatever. And he was like, man, like, no, you're missing the point. And I deviated. And then there was one day where I was with the goddess the Marigan, and she's the triple goddess of death. And so she is death, dying, prophecy, sovereignty and power, right? Wisdom. She's amazing. And she's who I work with as a keening grief tender. And I was in a journey one day, I felt this call, and I had my own grief release, and I didn't know what it was around. And that's okay. I don't need to know, but I was with her and she led me to the water. And I remember calling Kristy just sobbing after this happened. And in the journey, I'm by this water's edge, and there's Jesus in the water. I'm going to get emotional again. And he puts his hands out and he's like, come. And I was like, okay. So I unceremoniously was like, okay. And I walk in and he plunges me in the water. And I'm in a journey. So I was like, obviously I can breathe. But then I was like, shouldn't you let me up so I can breathe? And he's like, no, you breathe through me. And I was like, what? And then there's something clicked and I let go. And it was like, here was the divine masculine coming back into my life to match the divine feminine, to bring balance to me and to my practice, which I desperately needed. But I didn't know I needed. And then after that, I was amazed, and it really truly changed. It changed how I held myself and how I had faith in my work and who I am and what I do, and in those who find me, because I knew God was a part of bringing them to me. But I remember saying to him, so you forgive me for doing all this other stuff? And he's like, child, I didn't need to forgive you. He's like, you're the one who pushed me away. He's like, but you let me back in. And he's like, I've just been waiting for the moment. And here was the moment. So that's what brings me to connect with you. Now I will hand the mic over to Kristy.
Well, mine's more of like a rogue piecing together, not one cohesive story, which I think can relate to a lot of people, being a mutt of spirituality for such a long time. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic school. I did all the theologic study, and just kind of like the regular Catholic schoolgirl story in college just went deep end of everything that's not that, right? And Martha, being connected to her within the first few minutes of meeting, the resistance melted. Like she had said, the milk thing opened up this awesomeness. And she won't tell you this, but she used to wear her comforter, which was made of dinosaurs, as a toga.
Oh, nice.
Around.
Not made of dinosaurs. They had pictures of cartoon dinosaurs exercising with boom boxes. Yeah, they weren't. I'm not that old.
And one of the things that felt authentic and endearing within that relationship is actually going to be full circle with part of my story in the end. I went pretty far away from the church. I had lots of church hurt. It never sat with me that I was evil. I was born evil. I was born into this original sin, and I was like, but I can never do anything to make up this ground unless, it was always service based or act based, it felt. So I went to massage school. So I'm a body worker, massage therapist, and I was introduced to the world of spirituality and Reiki and polarity therapy and energy, as humans being, right? I was able to become fascinated with the spiritual element of the human condition. And within that experience, it just opened my subconscious mind to there is a vast world of fruitful darkness that nobody really understands. And I really, really want to design my life around discovery. So when I've always been fascinated with the human body and the miracle, the living, walking miracle that it is. And in my own evolution of becoming a wife, becoming a mother, going through these archetypal ceremonies that didn't feel very ceremonious at all, right? You're just thrust into them. I had a complete identity crisis, and I fell into addiction. I fell into exercise addiction. I fell into alcohol addiction, other types of use just to escape all that stuff that I had discovered. And then it was actually in the depths of that I had this intense encounter with Jesus. Like I was in my living room. I'm getting nervous actually, so I'm going to take a minute to really say this story because I was in my living room in active addiction. I had jumped into a life of like promiscuity and all like everything that I was labeled as a sinner, in my head, very Mary Magdalene, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm identifying with that life pre-Christ. And I remember knowing in the back of my mind, like, there is more. So I'm going to finally like talk to God, like God, not any like meaty middleman, not any
Mm-hmm.
middle saint, not any like that I was raised believing in, not intercessors, what they call them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just said, yo, buddy, if you're there, you better show up because I'm going to end my life tonight. And I don't know if this resonates, but the most Christian, like enthusiastic, charismatic Christian woman, the very next day in the morning, out of the blue, called me and said, we have to meet for lunch. God told me. And I was like, great. I have to go be with this like, we know the types that are just raising hands, praise the Lord is everything. And I was resistant to that energy and very Holy Spirit oriented. And I'll never forget, it took me about 6 months to realize that was God saying, no, I got more for you. I'm here. I showed up. Hello. I was actually always here. I'm going to send you the woman that annoys you the most to kind of counter and shift your perspective of you're here. I'm here. Like this is real. I am real. And I think that was like that the book opened for me, like the exploration of all that could be became real in that moment. And since then, I tried to go the traditional Christian route. I went back to a church. I went through 4 churches till I found what I call Jesus behind the pastor's eyes. And I met face to face with all of them. And I was like, I'm sorry, you're not it. You're not it. You're not it. And then I found this one pastor that like when I would go, it would everyone in the room would disappear.
Huh.
And I would feel like the worship music was like piercing. I remember being on my knees and there's this song called I Ran Out of the Grave.
Mm.
And I'm going to get so emotional because in that moment, I encountered the Holy Spirit in here. Like
Mm-hmm.
it broke my ribs open. The whole soma had a reaction to that frequency, that song. And I don't really remember what the sermon was about, but it was truly that moment where I was like, oh, I understand death and rebirth. I understand what Jesus was saying about those who lose their life will find it. I understand. And there was this visceral understanding. And so ever since then, I've been on this like bits and pieces revolution to understand the original thread of Christ and the original like unboxing, so to speak, of what he truly meant. And so sitting in the feminine Christianity is something that's really kind of like adjacent. And I feel very like open and honest with all of my friends, but there's a level of disconnect that I have found through like talking with traditional, what I call classical Christians and helping them understand like the visceral connection to Christ and what it actually meant and the energy of that. And I
Mm-hmm.
found energy work, I found frequency therapy, sound therapy, all frequency and universal attunement, like all of it's God. And it just, to me, the spiritual but not religious thing sounds like super perfect in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So deconstructing the Bible, not using it as a prison or cover to cover, but almost like this Akashic library of what has happened through God in order for us to continue the story. We are a continuation of the story. We are the living word embodied. And so we are continuing to write this story that people thousands of years from now may be able to look back on and just be like, whoa, look at this new earth revolution. Like, I didn't realize that energy and frequency and all of that was really this conscious evolution of the soul. So that's kind of where I am. It's not really any sort of destination point. It's just this like fourth, fifth, sixth dimension ethereal thinking that I'm like contemplating all of the time and trying to trust that my story is my message, my mess to message.
Hmm.
And it seems pretty spot on. I'm trying to just sit up every day and just be like, what do you have for me? Because, this is going to confuse the hell out of me. Like, this is what I'm trying to embody, like, right this entrainment. So,
Yeah.
long story long.
No, yeah. I'm just fascinated to hear both of your stories. And I don't know if we need to start in a specific place or whatever, but I'm curious, Martha, on your website, you mentioned growing up as a government kid. So by the time you two had met in college, how often had you been moving around and what was your religious experience like?
Yeah, we lived in the US until I was about 6 or 7, and then we
Hmm.
moved abroad and then came back around the age of 14. So if you think about numerology, every 7 years is pretty significant. And so
Yeah.
those 7 years that I was abroad were incredibly formative. The first 7 forming who I am within the family, the next 7 is who am I with the world. And so we began in Bangladesh back before it was this massive city of
Wow.
Dhaka. And so there were still rice paddies and rickshaws everywhere. And
Yeah, but like a spiritual kind of
it was
undertone
beautiful.
to everything.
Yeah. I mean, it was still a Muslim country, but there was a large Hindu presence. And so my
Hmm.
bus driver was Hindu. And one time we were driving home and I can see my house, but we sat in the bus for 45-ish minutes and waited because there was a bull in the street. And the bull is the Vahana, or the vehicle of Vishnu. And so the driver being like, thank you, Lord Vishnu, for your message. Like, I see you. I love you. We will wait. And all the kids are like, come on, because we're just kids. And he's
Yeah.
like, no, 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 no. Like, we will wait. And he just was there, just patient. And I just remember being like, this is cool. Like,
Yeah.
we are waiting for nature just to do what nature does. Another thing was we were in Kathmandu, and I share the story a lot. It's probably the first time that I really felt spirit after being a little kid, and seeing like things in the air that weren't there, quote, quote. But
Hmm.
we were in Kathmandu and I walk into this Buddhist temple with my mom holding her hand. And we walk in, and it's like it was so quick. I blinked my eyes and I opened and I saw the whole space was empty except for about 50 to 70 monks sitting in lines in front of this massive gilded statue of the Buddha with all these candles, and they were chanting. And I said, I'm home. And
Oh, wow.
all of a sudden I blink again and I come back and I hear my mom say, what? And I look around and there's tourists everywhere and I'm so confused. And I said, I'm home? And she goes, whatever, Martha, because I was always the creative one,
Right. Yeah.
big imagination. And so then I just assumed everyone else has experiences like that, no big deal. And then we lived in Paris, where I felt connection to nature. I felt connection to
Hmm.
the water. When we'd be out at the beaches, I just could feel something. I didn't know what it was. I just thought I liked to be out in nature and I didn't love being in a city.
Hmm.
And then we moved to Honduras. And I think the Catholicism of that country was very complicated for me. There was this devout Catholicism. Meanwhile, underneath all of that were these Mayan roots. And I remember going to a Mayan city called Copan, and I remember touching a glyph. I think it was a jaguar. And I just felt chills, like ice cold chills through my whole body. And I thought that meant there was a ghost nearby. So I freaked out and ran away. But now I'm like, damn it, Martha, you should have stayed there. Lean
Yeah.
in, I
Yeah.
say. But anyway, and so there was an awakening in my soul there as well. And so it's like I was incredibly blessed to have had this childhood, which was by no means romantic. I mean, it was romantic, but it was challenging. And middle school is rough no matter where you are in the world.
Right.
And
Thank you.
moving every 2 years is hard on
Hmm.
kids, and you're
Hmm.
learning new language. It's a whole new culture. Can I drink the milk here? Yes, we're coming back to milk. Ironically, I'm allergic to it now, but nonetheless, it was amazing. But what I think it did for me is when we came home and I started going back to church, I didn't really stick to it.
Right. Where did you
Yeah,
start going back to church? Was it Catholic or
it was
was it?
Presbyterian.
Okay. Okay.
And my family has this long line of ministers and pastors. And
Hmm.
So, this is what the family does. And I was like,
Right.
gosh, and I was like, remember at 15, I had this out of body experience. And I was like, something is out there. And it was like, I needed to know, like, what was this? Because this something is missing, right? And I Googled like Earth plus spirituality ? And they're like, it was Ask Jeeves, and it was like, congratulations, you are a witch. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, I read a book and I was like, this feels like I'm wearing someone else's shoes. It just doesn't feel right. So
Mm-hmm.
I like gave that all away. And my dad he was very supportive, but quite frankly relieved.
Right. Right.
Anyway, but I didn't really
That's
ever
cool.
consistently go back to church because everything I had learned from childhood was that God was in the animals, God was in the trees, God was in the stone. And of course, that is so
Mm-hmm.
aligned with shamanism, but also aligned with the spirituality of Celtic
Mm-hmm.
culture.
Mm-hmm.
And, when Kristy and I kind of came back together, we had to deviate. I was in a deep dive with shamanism. She was going through her own addiction and recovery and path with Christ. Like when we came back together on the side of it and we're bonding over this newfound connection to something that filled our souls up, it was really exciting to see how paralleled they were, even
Mm-hmm.
though hers was a bit more like structural, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
guess would be the right word. And mine was a little bit more like freeform. But then, yeah, it was really, and so we both kind of come back to this point of, like Kristy said, with the energy of God and the energy of healing as like, this is God's love. This is love. This is truth. Breath work. We both do breath work. That is
Mm-hmm.
truth. That is spirit truth. Energy work. That is spirit love. And it's like, it's really exciting. But I think growing up overseas helped me to see beyond the boundaries of the edifice of church.
Yeah. You definitely got more of, and not just one culture, but the indigenous underpinnings of I like what you said, structural. So Christianity sort of becomes this framework that sits on top of what is already embodied in these different cultures. And you got exposed to that indigenous embodiment sort of before you encountered the structures of whatever the religions were.
Mhm.
This was the bus driver. I love that story. And I was getting chills when you were talking about your experiences in just the openness to the reality, the deeper reality of what was going on around you and what you were in touch with in terms of those indigenous roots.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's a perfect touch point to go back to that idea of the structural versus the free form. Like you got to color outside the lines a little more. But Kristy, I'm wondering, in terms of that structure, I took a couple of notes. So I'm going to go back to your comment about the difficulty that you had with the spirituality that you were given in the Catholic Church. It seems like the primary sticking point for you was this concept of original sin, being born evil, being born into evil, the proclivity towards evil. I felt that in my spirit. I struggle with that a lot. But for me, it wasn't until the 6th grade we started getting serious and taking the theological religion classes. My grandfather had just died. I'm 11, 12 years old. My grandfather had died, and we were talking about death and heaven in this class. And I asked the question, will my grandfather remember me when I get to heaven? So several assumptions there that my grandfather was going to heaven, that I would be going to heaven. But my primary concern was, am I going to have a chance to continue this relationship that I want to be a part of my life? And obviously beyond life, I had this idea of it doesn't really end at that point. Like we're going to continue, and I want to continue with certain people and ideas, and I want to explore these things. Well, my teacher's answer was completely inadequate. First of all, she said no, but her idea of heaven was that we would be so preoccupied with worship that we would forget all of our earthly experiences, that there would be nothing more important to us than what we were doing, So like I've had 30 years to unpack that. 40,
Right.
almost 40 years to unpack that. So I can appreciate the idea of presence and being so embodied in what we're doing that things kind of fall away that aren't important. But the idea that what we're doing in heaven is just like repeating worship songs, or sitting in the clouds playing the harps, and whatever that concept of worship was to her, that was what was going to take our focus, excuse me, and that the things that are unimportant, that those would be relationship, that really hurt me. I wasn't cool with that, because if I was going to be embodied in something, if I was going to be so present to something that everything unimportant fell away, it's going to be relationships. It's going to be knowledge and spirit and those things that really activated me. Like when Martha was talking about just the natural inclination to say, this is cool. I love this, that openness to spirituality. I share that. And I think that that's cool, that lineage through your family. I think, Martha, that is kind of the lightning rod that travels through the family. I think that spiritual ley line through the family is really cool. But that's not normal for everyone. Like some people are turned off by that because it's scary or it's too out there. So, Kristy, sorry, here's the question. So what about your Catholic experience do you feel like lacked the spirituality that you felt like you came back around to in that experience that, and we'll talk about suicide a little bit, and suicidal thoughts, because that's something that we share as well. But what about, struggling with the idea of you being evil? You were interested in spiritual things, but you didn't feel like that framework or that structure was providing that connection for you. So I'm curious why, and what was it about that didn't feel spiritual? And then when you reconnected with Christianity, was that a charismatic experience? Was that evangelical? What did that look like when you came back around?
So I will just validate the sixth grade, seventh grade version of me sitting there looking at my teacher saying, this feels kind of like horse manure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what you were saying as far as relationship with my grandfather relationship, that is a lot of what is missing. To your first point, what is missing to me is the embodiment. If we're supposed to believe in Christ, and what Christ did and showed us on earth was relationship. So we are not, and I think there's this disembodiment of teaching that's happening. Like you cannot get to here unless, right? And so what was missing for me was, who are you, human, to tell me, human, that you are better than me? Or in my middle school mind, you're not better than me.
Right.
Like, I'm really
But
sorry.
you
I
have
know
the answers.
it doesn't feel like wisdom,
Right.
which is also what Christ embodied. So I was like, this is smoke and mirror. Like all of this, the way I really felt it was being preached to me was, you are this, that's it. Like there is no questioning outside of this. There is no reality outside of this. There's no exploration, or it's a sin. And so that construct really demoralized me. So when I found spirituality, it became this Pandora's box and it can be really scary. Like Martha was saying, Jeeves called her a witch, it's sitting there going, whoo, I got to be careful, because some of my original foundation framework says this stuff is evil, and I'm confused. Someone who has got hormones raging and then subconscious programs and beliefs that are just honoring and projecting my experience. I'm just like, I'm confused, right? So it's the spiritual, and my mom, we mentioned her before, she's always been this yes, she was Catholic, but she always told me, I go to church because I feel God giving me the blessing. I don't even listen to what's happening. She goes, when that Eucharist enters me, I believe I'm becoming a part of the whole. And she's always, and we have Celtic lineage as well, but we've always been interested in native spirituality and indigenous population spirituality. Martha and I have that in common. She was able to experience it. I was always my life changed when I heard the Disney movie Pocahontas song, "You never step in the same river twice." And I was like, what? The water is always changing, always flowing. And, I was like, that's magical.
Hmm.
That perception like blew my little brain wide open. And so there was always something inside here that knew the truth, that seeking was actually part of our experience here and questioning what we were told, all that stuff, and like seeking God, moving the other parts of our construct out of the way so that we can truly seek God. And the evangelical experience was, I think, so relative to me. Like it was almost like I needed to be bounced into this relativity to just be like, I hate that enough
Hmm.
for it to awaken me.
Hmm.
Just if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, and if that answers all your questions. But
I I think so. Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what ended up creating this shell of me kind of starting to crack so the light can come through.
Hmm.
And then ever since then, and my work with Martha and actually establishing the understanding of what shamanism truly is versus what I was taught it was
Hmm.
has given me I guess, open-mindedness, open-heartedness to understand my true beliefs as far as nature being the creation, and I am a part of the creation. If we understand it biblically, like we were created,
Hmm.
right? And so every cell, every function, and going all the way back to the human body, like everything is very carefully crafted and can be used in order to develop our spiritual nature, our walk with spirituality, our walk with deity, our
Hmm.
walk with self, the self as the divine. And I think a lot of that has come full circle for me now in my 42nd year. And we talked about the cycles of seven in numerology. I just began a new cycle of seven, and it was with no coincidence that I stepped into like fully letting go, like a death of all that was, of all of my old story.
Hmm.
And I am fully in the process of surrendering to the energy within my heart and just being like, I have to say no because it's not a yes. I have to say yes because it's not a oh, no, no, no. And if it's an oh, no, 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 that's not my voice.
Hmm.
Or that's not God's voice, that's mine.
Hmm.
There's work here. There's work here. Let's tumble. Put itself in the
Yeah.
tumbler for purification type of
Dance.
thing.
It's a
Yeah.
dance.
Yeah. The psychosomatic, spiritual, ethereal, multi-dimensional understanding of time, space, spirit, like quantum.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It makes life like, whoa. That's how
Hmm.
it feels to me. I'm just like, whoa, what is happening?
Right.
So it becomes like a relationship
Right.
coming full circle with not only the truth, but with the quantum field, with creation, with my path, with you, with Martha. Everything is this quantifiably a beautiful, energetic experience, and it's all being crafted and co-created. And so, um,
That's
it's just,
beautiful. So the reason why I ask questions about like your religious experience and pinpointing like was it Catholic, was it evangelical, is because my audience is primarily deconstructing Christians. So that's the language,
yeah,
that's the framework that we're coming out of. And you've got a broader experience of spirituality and especially the indigenous framework that's underneath those structures or the roots that are underneath those structures. But within Christianity, because of how bifurcated it became, you've got the Catholic line and then you've got the Protestant line. But within the Protestant line, that was like a freaking firework. I mean, like there are so many different lines to trace in Protestantism. And the reason why I want to delineate that for some of the listeners is because people like me who had a mainline experience and then transitioned into evangelicalism, especially the flavor of evangelicalism that I transitioned into, they're going to understand some of the issues that I've had with trying to reintegrate myself into church. One of the problems that I've had is that my evangelical experience was a lot more charismatic. And so there was this invitation to dance with and to entangle yourselves with spiritual reality. We talked about the powers behind things. We talked about the power of prayer for healing and things like that. So even though it's not the same language, it's got this Christian vocabulary. We're talking about energy. We're talking about presence. We're talking about spirit in a way that invites you into embodied experience. But mainline Christianity, even having grown up Catholic, the liturgy is beautiful. And what you said about your mother's experience of receiving communion and feeling that connection, I have that experience having grown up Catholic. So the sacraments are sacred. The liturgy is sacred, but there was something missing, which is why I wanted to touch on what you felt like was missing in your experience. And I don't know that you can pinpoint something that should be done better or something that's done wrong, but that deep spiritual connection, that's what I'm hungry for. That's what people are hungry for. And that's why they're either returning to different expressions of Christianity to try to experience that, or becoming more spiritual, not religious, and recognizing that if they can allow those walls to fall down, that they can find what they're seeking in places that were once taboo or restricted to them, you know?
I think the scary thing becomes the boundaries to
Right,
the soul, and the soul is boundaryless,
right,
so it's this beautiful gift that our generation gets to, we get to do this. It's
right.
hard, it's scary, and that missing piece that you were just touching on, I think, is the fear of embodying the innate knowing that there is more. There is more charismatic Holy Spirit work. And that's why I say people are afraid of the Holy Spirit. That's what it feels like in a lot of ways. To feel, to feel. Like they're afraid to feel God, feel Christ, feel Jesus. Like that's what he did. He went and he was like the original anarchist. He's
Mm-hmm,
like, no, 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 feel me.
mm-hmm,
I am the way, the truth, and the life. And that means, full stop surrender. Just, he was a starving nomad. That's what I
mm-hmm,
tell people, like, nothing else truly compares to when we can be in that Holy Spirit place of this feeds me. This
mm-hmm,
feeds me, and all decisions can come from this place. And I think that's what the teachings are missing is how do you sense the Holy Spirit? Do you get visions?
mm-hmm,
Do you get feelings? Do you get audible? I hear God. The prophets had
mm-hmm.
this, and they were no different. They were human, and
Right.
we wrote about them. And why don't we talk more about these these fruits of
Mm-hmm,
the Holy Spirit and how they are honored within our divinity, our DNA? And in order to hear God, like my son feels God when he's hiking. He doesn't
mm-hmm,
talk about
mm-hmm.
it. He doesn't, but I know. We
Right.
don't have to even say words, like you can see it. And my daughter said to me once, "What's the Holy Spirit?" And I was like, "Well, it's a feeling of truth. You get goosebumps sometimes. And what do you feel?" And she goes, "Oh, like when it's snowing and you look outside and everything is silent." And I was like, "Yes,
Yeah.
that one. Sure." Like if that's what you feel as stillness, kiddo, like hold on to that.
Mm-hmm,
And I think traditional, deconstructing the notion that that's not possible is what's missing. Developing our relationship to the other, to God as otherness. Like, how do you feel? How do you hear? How do you know? And that's what I say. It's less faith, it's more knowing to me.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I'm not walking by faith, I'm walking by knowing. And that's a deeper
mm-hmm.
word, in my opinion. And
Right.
that's just my
I
opinion.
want to
But
put a pin in that because the knowing, I think that the embodiment is critical to the knowing.
absolutely.
So I want to talk about that. But first, when you said that one of the things that's missing in Christian experience, especially, is language for how we connect to spirit, how we engage with spirit, I would say, again, having that more charismatic experience that to me, it's not the opposite, but it swings in the opposite direction. You have people that will talk about spirit in a way that is self-serving, in a way that is manipulative. God told me this.
Yes.
The
Oh, yeah.
Spirit has showed me this, and it's it's done in such a way that the framework has already established a hierarchy for authority, a patriarchy for authority. And so that has eliminated the possibility of questioning and seeking and like personal embodiment, so that there's this forfeit of your own intelligence, of your own embodied experience and the questions that you have. And it's not a dance anymore. It's a march. I say, you do. I lead, you follow. So I think it's complicated within those frameworks because they've been established for a reason. One of my previous guests said that religion is the bureaucracy of spirituality.
Yeah.
And I love that phrase. That was Stephen Ferrara, who talked about how we process grief and things like that. But again, he grew up Catholic, and so he's very familiar with that system in all of its ancient glory. And that's what it was created for, was for control.
Yes.
It's the bureaucracy that says this person's in charge. We're going to follow this person. This person is the intermediary, to go back to words you used. And we don't get individual access to spirit. So that's a perfect transition. We've kind of talked about deconstruction and the middle space where you both found yourselves. And I want to talk more about how you were exposed to, for example, like Martha, you talked about like Japanese concepts of like Reiki and spirit and energy healing and things like that. You've talked about shamanism. You've talked about Celtic energy and things like that. So how you got exposed to those things and developed your thought and how you learned and got to where you are. But we've also kind of passed into the construction part of what you built after everything kind of came apart and the cracks let the light through. So we can go either direction there, but I think that was a perfect transition to look at how you moved away from that kind of patriarchal structure. Obviously, you were more deeply connected with the feminine, and then you had to come back to the masculine. So I'm curious what that dynamic looks like, how you were exposed to these different things. And then I want to talk about the particularities of energy healing and trauma and navigating things like that.
Yeah. And if I may touch a little bit on what you guys were just talking as well, I think one of the things, especially for me, after my first ever apprenticeship meeting, I was paralyzed with fear about what did I sign myself up for in the Egyptian mysteries. I was like, what is this? Journeying? I was terrified. And I was like, I was walking through the trees and I was like, okay, where does this come from? And I need to find out. And that's where I was faced with all of my ancestors who were men of the word, right? Or women of the word who supported those men. And I had to give
that was allowed in Presbyterian.
Right. And I had to give that fear of God back because I was like, I can't move forward if I'm holding on to your fear. We'll come back later, as it turns out, years later, to face that fear together, and I will help you heal it. I was like, but for now, I can't do this. And I think what makes it so scary is a few different things, because first of all, if we open up, let the light in, and we see that God can be accessed beyond a building, beyond an individual who has access, right? And not, it's just everywhere, or he's or they are everywhere. Then it begins to open up the question of what else is not the full picture, but I was told it was the full picture. What else in my life is not fully open? And I think that is where we start to question, are my parents these amazing, all-knowing, wonderful examples of whatever? A lot of times, no. But as children, we grow up enduring whatever our environment is, thinking these people love me. Well, they're just people living a very wounded life. And this does kind of get to the trauma, right? They're these people living a wounded, complicated, challenged life where they're trying to maybe be better than the generation before them, or maybe they're not. And we can love them and they can love us. It's not mutually exclusive. But even that, this idea that our parents have all the answers, is something that is that hierarchical reiteration that we see in dogma and religion, that we see in politics, that we see in money and economics. It is everywhere. So if we break one open and start to ask what else, it destabilizes our whole world. And that can be really freaky. So that's why a lot of times people are like, well, let me get the mortar
Right.
and go over these cracks. I'm just not going to
Right.
ask these questions because I don't want to deal with all of it at once. But the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about God and spirit and the way our angels, our ancestors who want us to succeed, and I mean succeed in terms of wellness. I don't mean
Hmm.
succeed in terms of money,
Right.
but these allies that want to help us move forward aren't going to give us an avalanche. They're going to
Hmm.
say, we're going to give you as much as you can handle at one time because we want you to do well. We want you to be well.
Right. There's a theology of consent we talk about in the circles that I'm a part of, but
Yes.
that's the idea. Like, you have to ask the question. You have to move in the relationship towards this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so I think what I have found is that when we begin to open up those questions and we begin to say, what else don't I know? Then we
Hmm.
do start to see so much of what has been created for us to fit into, and that we can still live a modern human life in a non-modern way. We
Mm.
can still learn from the mythology. I know we talked about lacking language and lacking kind of pictures in our modern theological and social world, but that's what that's what the mythologies are for. So when we go
Hmm.
back to the stories, when we go back to these universal wisdoms that we learn about in core shamanism. And
Hmm.
what I mean by universal wisdom in core shamanism is the idea that shamanism as a practice existed around the world across time and space.
Hmm.
And these practices existed in these indigenous communities across the world before people were boating across oceans to say, hey,
Hmm.
what's up? What kind of goods you got? I got sugar.
Good old colonization.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before all of that, and I realize I should probably close my blinds so I don't just have the...
No, it's perfect the way the light is
Yeah.
shining on you as you're
I was
speaking
gonna say
truth.
it works so good.
Okay. And so, all of these practices are happening before there's intercultural communication. But yet these rites of passage, these rituals, these ceremonies, these beliefs are centrally connected. They may have
Hmm.
different names and faces because, people in northern Canada live immersed in snow, whereas people in Nigeria are like surrounded by ocean and desert and maybe trees as well, right? Like different worlds. So we have to have different names and expressions of God to fit the world that we live in. But underpinning all that is the same stuff. And so core shamanism is looking at those overlaps and making it that Venn diagram saying what is central here is core shamanic practice.
Hmm.
And so in learning core shamanism, hold on, I started to lose my train of thought. Hold
Sorry.
on. No, it's okay. It's all good because, so much of this is not just fully me speaking. It's a little bit guided as well. So as we start to open up, as we start to see that in core shamanism, these universal wisdoms are something that we can bring into our life to understand our modern experience. We can look to the stories, whether it's ancestrally connected or just something that really calls our spirit, because sometimes our soul has its own ancestry. Then we can get the words and the phrasing and the languaging and the pictures or the feelings of what we are experiencing, because it is so cyclical and it is so mirroring of the past. And so I love when you guys are talking about the Eucharist, that is so similar to feeling that sense of sovereignty. When we drink, for example, the goddess Maeve, she crowned 9 kings, right, in a row. She was the daughter of the king of Tara. And so she was the one as sovereignty goddess embodiment, meaning she was the land. The land was her body. And she would be the example of who helps allow crops to grow. I crown this king because he is the best example of a good, strong, wise, compassionate, and patient, good example of what a king needs to be for the people and for the land. He will not raise the fields to put whatever he wants down. He will take care of the land. And so when she gives her body to the king, she feeds him mead, honey, wine, which is Maeve, right? Maeve and mead. And so she gives him the drink of her body, this honey wine, to say, I give you my body, I give you the land to preside over. And the moment you start being a jerk, I'm kicking you out.
Yeah.
And I've got someone ready in the wings waiting because I
Because
know
there's sacramental language. There's a covenant there. You are saying,
Yes.
I am you and you are me,
exactly.
which is what Jesus prayed before he was in the garden, that they would be in me as I am in you.
Yeah. And so And so if we start to see that experience as something that we are also entitled to, and not entitled as though there's a power dynamic here, but that we are all born worthy of sovereignty, of
Mm-hmm.
connection to the land, and by doing so, connection to spirit,
Mm-hmm.
connection to God in all life,
Mm-hmm.
then we start to see ourselves as not better than anyone else, but equally worthy.
Right.
And
The
that,
divine in me recognizes the divine in you.
exactly. Namaste,
Jesus said,
right?
"Love." You're right. Jesus
Yeah.
said,
Love
"Love your
your
neighbor
neighbor.
as yourself."
Yeah.
And
He
then we
also said,
start
love
to,
your neighbor as I loved you.
Yep.
That, the,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Exactly.
and that
The
perfect
destabilizes
line.
so much.
Sorry
Yeah.
to keep interrupting. I'm
No,
No,
it's
getting so
okay.
excited.
it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, no, when the rulers and the teachers of the law, when the people who were obsessed with the framework asked him, what is the most important law? What's the most important rule? What's the lodestone or the load bearing wall that we're supposed to frame everything on, hang everything on? And he said there was one commandment, but he gave it to them as a two-sided coin. He said,
Yeah.
you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you love your neighbor as yourself. So relationship, covenant relationship is how we understand I lost the word I was thinking of, but that's the imperative of our existence, of our embodied experience, is to be in relationship with the divine and with each other because they are the same.
Yeah. And so that two-sided coin is a perfect lead in to the kind of structure, flow, feminine, masculine of the path, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so shamanism, we could see it as a structural practice. So in many ways, it is very masculine. And the medicine work that I do as a keener is very feminine because it's completely based on the individual or the group that I'm working with.
Mm-hmm.
It is all flow. It is all faith and trust and listening. And so the two balance each other out. But with shamanism, the reason why I think my soul was called to start there is because it does have that kind of structure. It has the understanding that human teachers who are older and wiser than you have something to teach you. It does not make them better than you, but it helps the human teachers, as I tell my students or mentees, I am here because I help you make sense in human language, in our modern human time, what these universal wisdoms are saying, or what God or your journey was about. What is the symbolism of this animal or this deity or this rock or this? I help to make sense of it as human. But spirit is the one that is largely guiding the expansive growth. So I am but a conduit. I am standing on the side and saying, I don't have all your answers. I never would. I shouldn't. But I can stand here along your side and walk the path with you to help you as you expand and grow as God, as spirit guides you to do so, as you are willing and open to let happen, because we can all resist the call, right? It doesn't always look so good when we do that, because sometimes we have to do it. So the call gets louder and uglier, but but nonetheless, I don't have those answers, but I will walk alongside of you as you discover them within yourself. And so we need our human teachers. We rely on spirit to take us through those rites of passages to help us learn and grow. And then our community is the one that looks back and says, you've been in service to us and you've helped us, you have healed, you have guided, you have supported, etc. Whatever the role of the shaman at that time or in this current time is, it is when the community reflects back to the individual, you are shaman, you are legitimate, you are doing the work. That's when we call ourselves shaman. I'm honored to have been called shaman by quite a few different groups of people by this point, which I'm I don't take that lightly. I'm very honored by it. But I do think it's absolutely beautiful that shamans, we understand everything is held in balance. So when we are in extremes, we are going to hit the other extreme before we start to peter back into a place of balance. So it's not about living an ascetic life of, I will drink only water and eat bread and sit on the mountaintop and pray. We're human, have some human experience, but it also doesn't mean I'm going to go do whatever the heck I want, live a life of indulgence and fuck off with everything spiritual. Excuse me for cursing. It's
Oh,
about,
no, that's okay here.
it's about realizing that we're allowed to indulge, and we should also have our moments of piety and modesty.
Right.
that we are human and there is no perfect center point. It is always an oscillation. There is light and there is dark. Look at the sky. How
Mm-hmm.
does the sky change as the wheel of the year turns? That is truth. How do the trees lose their leaves and say, I just need to take a break? I
Mm-hmm.
need some winter. For those who were in the jungle, their balance comes differently because every day is the perfect amount of 6 hours and 12 hours and 12 hours. I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
planet I was on versus now, but Mercury. And so, it's all about that beautiful place of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that comes back to your point about God saying, like, be this, love this, embody that. It is. It is about us as individuals, and yet it has nothing to do with us as individuals. And if we can find peace with
Mm-hmm.
that, then we have found, I think, the gateway to God in our body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thanks.
The
Let's,
way, the truth, and the light.
yeah.
Yeah.
And again, for my listeners' benefits, I'm not going off on a tangent. We have a vocabulary for this. And in terms of scientific language, psychological language, we're talking about the dissolution of ego, the recognition that all things are connected, that we are all connected. There is an individual, but there is also a whole. Recognizing and living into that connection is what creates wholeness making and what helps us to experience the fullness of our existence. All right, so I want to connect some dots with the work that you're doing. And specifically, I want to talk about the invitation that you give to people on your website. It says, I can be your shepherd through the dark times, guide you through the chaos of death and the rebirth. Just unfold that, unpack that
Sure.
for me. What does that mean?
Yeah,
Chaos of
absolutely.
death and rebirth.
Yeah, it's very sexy languaging, isn't it?
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it.
So the idea here is that in life, whenever we go from one chapter to another, whenever we have a relationship end, whenever we have a change, really, we are experiencing a death because something is ending, something is closing. And then there is this time in between, this gestational time where we take the information that we have gleaned from our experience and we bring it into a new sense of self. Who am I now because of this experience? And then the rebirth is, okay, in that gestated time, something within me was starting to stir and awaken, whether it's a curiosity, a desire, a sense of self-knowing and appreciation, a healing, whatever. As we recognize that there's a seedling of something new birthing in that gestation, that's when we move into the rebirth. That's when we start to see, okay, I have a new sense of purpose within myself that drives me forward. And it is a chaotic time. And any sort of ending is chaotic because it calls into question, who was I? Why did I tolerate that? Or what did I love about that? And I'm sad it is over. It could be any melee of questions and experiences and emotions. So it is chaotic because like anything falling apart or anything changing, it requires us to let go. And that is hard. And so when I say I shepherd people, my soul's purpose and this isn't self-actualized. Like this is in my birth chart, my Mayan birth chart. It is also in my soul purpose as a keener, as a healer. But I have walked the depths of death in myself so much that I feel like it's like a cavern of 50 Costco's. I'm like, let's go. It's huge. I can walk in there and what that means for anyone listening who's like, what are you talking about? It means I've done the work. I've done my work within me because I can't take anyone through their darkness unless I've walked my own. Because I have to have the faith in the depths of the darkness to say, I don't have the answers, but I know the answer will come through me and it will guide us back to the light within you. That is what I mean. I have done that work within myself to be able to guide others. And when we say darkness and light, it's not a bad versus good.
Right.
There is such a thing as living too much in the light. Look at Icarus, right? Look at the Tirnanog, these beautiful otherworldly places in Celtic mythology get zany. People get exhausted and they come back to their, they're in the other world for what feels like a day or two. It's actually been like 700 years in our human time. And they come back and they immediately perish because they just were in the light and they were dancing and and then they go nuts. And then they just, they die. But like the point is in that story is like, don't get lost in the light. Love and light language that we see in modern pop spirituality is only half the story. The shadow, the depths, the darkness, the death is not evil. This is where our woundedness has grown to hide parts of our soul that has been shoved down, repressed, suppressed, torn off. I'll explain that in psychological terms in a second. Torn off and hidden and disassociated, right? So that's what I mean is when we say soul loss in shamanism, in modern psychology terms, that is disassociation. When we survive a trauma that is so intense that we disassociate entirely for survival. And that version of ourselves that pulls out and becomes a third party on the wall or the ceiling, watching what's happening to our body, that little version of ourselves, that's a piece of our soul. And that soul piece gets stuck in that moment. And then we move on, the body goes, and then we just learn to live, feeling a little out of it, a little lost, a little disconnected, and we just endure. And maybe it happens multiple times. It depends on the individual's life experience. That soul piece, it wants to be home in the heart. It wants to be woven back into your soul fabric, but it's hidden in the dark. And so we have to, when we walk through the depths of the dark, when we walk through that, the quote, scary, uncomfortable, we're basically saying to the wounded self, hey, I see you. I love you. You're no longer alone. I am here to hold you as your body finally feels safe to process the trauma through shakes, through crying, through laughter, through silence. Whatever it is for that individual, that body somatically releases the woundedness of the emotions gets to be freed because it's been witnessed and you have been validated and affirmed. This is a real emotion. You should be allowed to feel it and let's go. And then behind that is that soul piece, which we can say is a piece of the light. Sure. I think, I kind of loosely use these terms because people really glob onto them, but in truth, it's just a part of your soul. And so what we say to that soul piece is, hey, I see you. You're not alone. I'm here. I've got future you, and she or he or they need you, and they're ready to bring you home. But you need to be willing to let go of this. Are you willing to let go? And oh my gosh, almost 99% of the time, they're like, yeah, let's go. Do you have ice cream?
Yeah.
And and they come with me. Sometimes they don't because they're like, I don't know if I can trust that individual.
Right.
Because that future self kept putting me back here. Can I trust them? But, we talk through it. And then that soul piece comes back into the full present. And we say, what do you want your new job to be? How do you want to live as a part of the whole? And so then they get to reweave in with this new purpose. And this is called soul retrieval. But when I say we walk through, when I say that we walk through the darkness, we're just walking through the parts of the past, the parts of the body, whether it's this life or previous lives. We walk through that woundedness, through the dark, uncertain, unknown, to find the thing that you've been missing. And we bring that home so that you can see the world with more of your light online, more of your soul in your body. And after soul retrieval, people feel different. They see things that are new, but they're not new. They're brighter colors. They're stronger tastes. Sounds are longer, whatever. I worked with a woman recently. It was absolutely beautiful. She had this incredible soul retrieval, which took, because there was so much betrayal in her past, it took multiple sessions to slowly build that soul retrieval. But when it finally happened the next morning, I spoke to her and she said, I watched the sunrise. I've never seen the sunrise before. She goes, I know I've seen it, but not like this. She goes, I've never known it to be so beautiful. And we both were like, we were crying. But that's what I mean. Like, I'm there to help you do the work. I'm there to help hold you. I'm here as teacher and as shaman, as medicine woman, to help make sense of it so our mental mind can have the story that it needs to hold on to understand and define itself with. But I'm there to help people move through the uncertainty that otherwise we're told we're supposed to do alone, and we're just not. We're just not. And I'm also there to say to people, I see you in your pain. I see you in your confusion and your loss of faith or your loss of faith in self. And I still love you. I respect and I will listen to you. What do you want to do? I'm not here to tell you how to live or how to heal. I'm here to walk alongside you. So that's essentially what that means.
The next statement is, I can mirror the strength, courage, and trust that is hidden within you so you can reclaim it for yourself. Talk to me about mirroring. And then one of the thoughts that came at the last bit of what you were saying just now is, how do we as individuals who aren't shamans or who aren't practicing this, how do we still be present for other people? How do we still be in relationship and walk through these things with each other in a way that's wholeness making and healing? And Kristy, chime in here too as well.
Yeah. I'll answer it a little bit, but I'd love for Kristy to share this as well, because I think she has beautiful thoughts about it too. So if you think about spirit as this all-encompassing energy that is in all things, in us as well. And if we are just these little tiny threads that are dropped out of that massive fabric and put into these little bodies, sweet little bodies that are a gift from the earth, then I am in fact connected to and interwoven with you. So when I mirror you, I realize it's not about me. I don't need to be validated. I don't need to be affirmed. I don't need to razzle dazzle you. I just need to listen and tell you what I'm hearing you say, and then share from my lived experience and my educational experience what options are available to you. And so when I witness someone and I realize that what they're saying, even if they're coming at me, I've had people come at me and be like, say some pretty like ignorant things. And then I just say, okay. And it's hard and it hurts because I'm still human, but I deal with it in the right ways and I move on. And then, 2-4 years later, those people say, hey, I'm in a really tough spot and no one seems to listen. Or they're telling me the answers and the answers aren't working and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, okay. And there's no like, see, I told you so, like, don't, because it's not about me. And it takes great courage for someone who was living in a lot of fear to then come to me and say, you're my last hope. That's a lot of courage. And I mad respect that. So mirroring to me is an opportunity to say to the individual, I see that you are someone worth loving. I see that you are someone worth helping save themselves or helping reconnect to spirit so that you can feel that sense of refreshed opportunity or saving or whatever you want to call it. It is a way in which I can be devoted to spirit and be an agent of spirit, if you will, as a human. So mirroring is truly just giving people an unbiased way to understand themselves while also realizing that they are in front of me for a reason. So there is something that I in my medicine offer them, and I will do my diligence to listen past any ego or premeditated thought about it to say, all right, spirit, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? How do you want me to respond to this? So that's kind of how I engage with that, but I'll go pass it to Kristy.
Well, I love the language around mirroring for me is discipleship. And when I sit in the truth of my own healing journey, and I don't use mirroring as much as helping them remember themselves. Like all the things that you were just talking about, Martha, about soul retrieval is actually remembering. And so the language I use a lot in an embodiment session or a healing session is, you already know how to do this. I am just using the frequency in my voice, the energy of my touch to help you remember. You're okay. You're safe. I know this because I'm doing this work right alongside you. I'm never one that is, I've walked through the valley of the shadow and now I fear no evil. And I love the imagery of in the chapters in Matthew when he's talking about you have to take up your cross. In order to follow me, take up your cross. And soul retrieval and remembering for me is, what if our cross is shattered across the universe in pieces? And so I'm bringing back all the pieces of my cross so I can actually carry it and follow. Because until that shadow work is moved through, the relativity is not there. And we can't be actual stewards of the light, disciples of the light, unless we know darkness and we honor that darkness. So for me, it's helping mirror or disciple that it's okay, that depth of, no, you can come back to the human. Allow that human to ground into this pain right now because the pain is purposeful. And you're not alone when I sit with you just know that I can understand this frequency. And then the language, like Martha was saying, a lot of it is vehicle, right? I'm the vehicle. But I love that word discipleship for its vastness, its dynamic
Mm-hmm.
meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And, coming from a biblical perspective, for me, it's very much like, you know, forsaking the versions of me that I believed I was in order to find this soul piece that is the light. And all of these are not necessarily wrong, evil. They're just shadows of the light. Without the light, there are no shadows. So that means it's in there. So that's what I have to say about that. And in the body,
Beautiful.
and beautiful work about doing body work with this too, because there's less talking and it's more fully being. And what Martha was talking about is dissociation. We're all three in one. We're all a triune, right? And it's not just here and there. It's here, there, and in between.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all this beautiful, like, three triplets in all realms of thinking, of being, spirituality. Even the stoplight has three, red, yellow, and green. And there's that yellow piece that I think we focus on start and then destination, and this yellow piece. And we do proceed with caution. However, the beautiful thing about that yellow piece is it is the color of all of the potential that we have. And the body speaks in these beautiful languages, three different languages. And when we are doing this work, the body will tell us where we're holding on to the shadow work. And when we release that, it melts in. And the body has its own language. It's either sensation or emotion. And if we don't listen to those two things, it ends up as dysfunction. And so a lot of people only listen to this version of embodiment when there's dysfunction. And then we go someone outside of ourselves to fix it. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm trying to help you remember is actually, 3 years ago when you started getting sensation, oh, this doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
That was the message. That was the message.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we get you back into the present moment and remember that you actually have all the answers inside you? I'm here just to let you know, just to tell your subconscious, but your prefrontal cortex, hey, you have everything you need.
And I want to add, I think something that we haven't said here, but I want to name it because any good healer will do this, or rather not do this. We don't shame, we don't blame, we don't judge, we don't abandon. If an individual, I shouldn't say abandon, what I mean, like if an individual isn't serious about doing the work, we'll say like, either you're not ready or I'm not the right person for you. Let's find you the right person. That's not abandonment. That's liberating.
That's part of shepherding people to where they need to be. Yeah.
But at no point do when people come to us with their woundedness, their fears, their doubts, their nerves, or whatever it is that's crashing around them, at no point am I like, well, you made some big choices in your, no, I see you. I hear you. That's hard. Let's work through this. And I think that's a really important thing because that's part of what allows people to build trust with us specifically, but any good healer. And trust is necessary in order to feel safe enough to then move forward with the healing work. And I just want to acknowledge that Kristy is incredible. I have a handful of people who I deeply trust, and she is my go-to for body work and energy work. I'm like, I need you.
Yeah, I can see
Likewise.
that. That's beautiful. And just again, to connect some dots for people who are listening, one of the things that we're talking about here is radical acceptance, that non-judgment, that piece where, recognizing that everybody has their own story and their own experiences that they've come through. And it's not good or bad. It's not your fault or somebody else's fault. It just is. And radically accepting that you can't control the things that are happening to you, but you can control how you respond to those things. That's something.
I want to just jump in here and say something my therapist said to me a couple years ago, which was amazing. I'm a sexual assault survivor and an abduction survivor, and potential didn't fully get through, thank God.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember I was challenged by spirit to go to Ireland on a self-pilgrimage, a solo pilgrimage for 9 days. And it was terrifying. And but I had to work through all my layers because God was like, girl, you got shit to do. Like, we're ready to move you up and up level you, but you got to face some of these things.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my therapist, talking about it, and he said, Martha, it was never God's plan that you were raped. It was
Mm.
God's plan that you bounced back and found your strength and your voice and your presence. That's God. That
Mm-hmm.
other stuff, that was just a wounded human.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
I
like
was
to
like,
use
yeah,
organic language. I like to say that the shit happens, but we compost the shit
yeah,
because the shit is necessary for those good, healthy, amazing things to grow. But you got to
absolutely.
compost it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, that's it. That's it. It's just, it's a great radical acceptance is, and I think for me, in speaking for my path, and I've seen this with some individuals who I've had the pleasure of working with and the honor of working with, is that part of the radical acceptance, we think like, oh, we sure supposed to forgive those who hurt us.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the point. The point is to forgive ourselves for judging ourselves for the shit that happened, for not being able to see our woundedness until many years later when we were
Right.
finally ready to face it. That's the forgiveness, not because we're jerks for doing it. We had to survive. We had to endure.
Right.
That is a part of the process. But that self-forgiveness in thinking that we ever were to blame,
Right.
that is huge.
Yeah.
And then
I'm getting goosebumps again.
and a byproduct of that, a beautiful outcome of that is that we realize that that individual that hurt us is hurting way more inside themselves than anything they could have done to us.
And yeah,
And we
so
let go.
we have to forgive ourselves for the blame that we cast on ourselves and recognize, sometimes you have to recognize, I was a child.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I had to survive. Like you said, I didn't know how to deal with that. So I did what a child would do, and I hid it and I buried it. But then those things come up again and you blame yourself. Why did I do this? Why did I not do that? You were a child. Forgive yourself. And then the idea of that person who hurt us, hurting themselves, hurt people, but also the hurt that we cause others, we cause ourselves. We are all connected. That's a psychological thing. That's a spiritual and a psychological thing. Neuroscience. I love, Kristy, the way that you kept talking about remembering. And shout out to a friend of mine, Shalene Kendrick. She studies neuroscience and neurobiology, and she talks about healing the way that you are talking about healing, in a way that people can understand. This is connected to what we know about how the body works. There are studies and there is data and information out there that says, yes, this is true. We are spiritual beings. There is energy. There are things going on here that we don't understand. And when you're talking about mind, body, spirit, and the neuroscience behind that, people need to understand that we need to fully embrace what's going on to be embodied and to understand and to navigate these things and come out whole. So I love that. I love that you were mentioned remembering. So the podcast is called Get Behind Me, Jesus, which is kind of tongue in cheek. It's about getting away from the sanitized version of Jesus that I was given. This indigenous, starving, nomadic, brown-skinned man was made into this white, middle-class American. That's what Jesus is to a lot of people who grew up in the American Christian tradition. We've talked about spirit in a way that I think connects to the way that Jesus taught and the way that Jesus lived. But I'm curious for both of you, how does your practice relate to your understanding of Jesus and the principles of Christianity or all religious systems? Like, what do you mean by Jesus as the divine masculine? Who is Jesus to you?
Do you want me
Yeah,
to
go
go?
for it.
When we say the way, the truth, and the life as the exemplified human experience. So
Mhm.
for me, the genuine well masculine is how Jesus walked this earth. My very favorite story is the woman in the well. That's
Mm.
my very, very favorite story. And in that, the well literally represents the human striving, right? You drink from this well, you'll always be thirsty because it's human water. But Jesus sits. He doesn't have, and he goes into enemy territory. I
Mhm.
think that's what a
Mhm.
lot of us need to remember is the disciples are like, what are you doing, bro? Like,
Mhm.
this is Samaria. Like, what?
Mhm.
These people, we're Jewish. We don't associate.
Yeah. Breaks every taboo.
Right. And meanwhile, they worship the same God and they have the same ancestry. That's
Mhm.
the biggest takeaway from this story for me. They have the same ancestry, and it talks into the division of Christianity.
Mhm.
Like there's divisions here. So I mean that's a tangent, sorry. But in my work, I try to remember one of the things I always do is I wash people's feet.
Mm.
I don't tell them why, but I've had people say, "Is it because you hate stinky feet?" And I'll say, "No, it's because I don't even know. It just feels like an act of service.
Mhm.
And when I'm doing that, I'm praying, Lord, be with me. Lord, be with me. And go in peace
Mhm.
and love.
Mhm.
Go in peace and love." And that all of this is happening on a subconscious level because at this point, it's just something I have done for 20 years.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But the intentionality behind that is their energy feels that. And the woman in the well
Mhm.
showed up what the society considered a broken mess,
Mhm.
right? She had had 5 husbands. The well masculine would never judge where she had been.
Mm.
He was looking at the woman in front of him only. And she was just dejected, looking down, saying, "You don't want water from me. I'm just this, dismissive of
Mhm.
herself, herself and her pain." And when Jesus started speaking to her, he was speaking to her not as the society spoke to her, but he was speaking to her potential,
Mhm.
her
Mhm.
heart, saying, there'll be a point, a time where you're only going to worship in truth and spirit, and your status in this world does not matter. And
Mhm.
she's like, "You're just a prophet. And what are you just trying to tell me?" Or I kind of forget the exact words, but the feeling behind it is, "Oh, dude, this dude sees me.
Mhm.
Like, I'm really scared." And all of a
Mhm.
sudden she said, "You don't know what I've done. You wouldn't love me. You don't know what I've done." And he goes, "Actually, I do. Here's what you've done." And he just lays it out on the table. And she goes, "How did you know that?"
Mhm.
And that meeting someone in their pain and not trying to fix it,
Mhm.
not trying to fix it, seeing it. That is Jesus to me. The well masculine. When I show up for somebody, I'm getting goosebumps because that's where I try to
Mhm.
hold that space of just, I know, I know,
Mhm.
I know, buddy. It hurts. It hurts. And when we lie on this table, we're not going to forget that. What we're going to do is we're going to feel it. We're going to move through it. And I can hold this. You cannot scare me.
Mhm.
That's what I tell people all the time. There is nothing that can happen here that would scare me because I love you.
Mhm.
I actually love you because you are just in a different timeline, but I was there too.
Yeah.
And all I'm doing is holding my hand back and saying, "Hey, there's a way.
Right.
There's a way through this. I promise. Just take my hand." And that's the woman in the well. And she went forth and like jubilee for the rest
Mhm.
of her life. She
Yeah.
went back to her
She had to tell
relationship.
everybody about it.
She had to tell everybody about it, and that's the good news, right? That's the good news is that there is a way through all the shit.
Mhm.
And Jesus is the well masculine example of how we humanize that experience.
Mhm.
We can do that. He died literally showing us that we can also die.
Mhm.
Those who lose their life for their friends really will gain it.
Mhm.
That is the greatest act of love. And so when we die, like Martha's talking about this death process to ego or to the super ego or to the ego consciousness or that frequency, what we're doing is we're opening and expanding our compassionate authenticity. And that's the highest frequency we can embody. That's what Christ embodied.
Mhm.
Compassionate, authentic expression. And so that's what it means by "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Like, yes,
Mhm.
thank you for showing me. Now in this moment, please let me feel what I need to do.
Mhm.
Just let me
Yeah.
feel what to say to this human. Like there's even an act sometimes I do. Martha knows is like my spine becomes this like thing I can remove. And I'm like, take away my brain, my spine, and everything else, and let me be you. And what does this person need? Because I don't know.
Mm.
Everyone's showing up with a different story, and every body tells a different story. And so, depending on what level of trauma they've experienced and what their nervous system may be ready for, it's up to me to be fully authentically present. And I can't rely on my own strength.
Mhm.
So, Jesus comes in as my well masculine lamppost to my feet,
Mhm.
you know, that light on the hill, like all the things that he says, all the parables he told, all of them come back to this kingdom of heaven.
Which is in you.
Kingdom of heaven. Yeah,
And
it's right
I
here.
think is that connectivity, like he says in the prayer, I am in you and you are in me. Let them be in me.
My favorite thing that I think a lot of people miss in scripture is he says, I and the Father are one. And so if I am in you and you are in me, what does that mean?
You're in the
That
Father.
we and the Father are one. We are all connected to God. And Jesus just showed us the language, the verbiage, the being, the presence of how to do that. He is the way. And so that's why I get so like fired up about it, because I'm like, this is it. This is it. We
Yeah.
can do this. Actually, this is tangible to me.
Right.
And
And that's
there's
the
no
point. He modeled how we do this. His life was
Absolutely.
the example, like you said early on when we started this conversation. You hope that your work is your story. Your story
Yes.
is the point. That's the truth. Yeah. I love that. I love that context of Jesus at the well. And I love how that wraps together everything that we were saying. Yeah. Martha, what do you think?
Ditto.
Nice. Nice.
No, I mean, in truth, I mean, exactly. The well masculine is that container, the support system. You know, in Buddhism, they speak about the wisdom and compassion as being the feminine and the masculine. So compassion is the action. Wisdom is the knowing, is the surrender to truth. And so the two flow as one. And this is why when we see images of these esoteric deities in sexual union, it's not really about sex. It's about bridging these two as one, being the embodiment of the balance of the two.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's the same, exactly. Kristy said, for me, Jesus is a part of that structure of my work. So every day I begin work, I pray and I say, okay, I say a series of things. I get grounded with the earth. I ask her to let me reach in to receive my energy. Will I let her in? I basically make it a mutual bridging rather than saying I'm going to plunge my roots into the earth, which is so wounded masculine, right?
Right.
And so I ask her to meet me. I ask the middle, the elements and the seasons to meet me. I ask Great Spirit and God to meet me and to hold me. And that's what I feel Jesus does, is that he holds me, and he's the compassion. He is the container, the act of love without direction. Not direction, but like love without telling, right? And that is what, I remember reading it, like a Buddhist concept of compassion this was a Hindu understanding of compassion, was a woman with no arms at the river's edge watching a baby drown, which is an awful image. But what she's doing is she cannot save the baby. She can't, but she can witness the baby, and she can give it all the love for what that baby's path is. And this is very Hindu in this idea of karma and reincarnation, etc. But what I see with that is that's kind of for me what Jesus does, is he holds the space without telling me what to do until it gets to the point where the flow of wisdom that comes from the feminine example, or the goddesses, or spirit, or even from Jesus. Like sometimes he is that feminine flow of energy that comes through me and wisdom that comes through me and guides my words or my actions, the movements, the energy flowing into the body that I'm working with. Sometimes Jesus is both the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah.
But that really is it for me, is I look to him as to feel safe in what I'm doing. That's it. It's because deep down, I'm still human. And this world of shamanism is vast. And I am no perfect example of some amazing figure who's done it all and I got all the answers and I'm going to go into the other world because I'm a champion. Like, no, I want my allies by my side. I don't want to be alone. And so that's, So like Kristy said way more eloquently, but yeah, that's what he does for me.
I love it. It's beautiful. And just in case the listeners haven't had enough of my heretic nature, I just want to say, Jesus was queer as fuck. Scientifically speaking, if the virgin birth actually happened, Jesus only had female DNA in his body, which means he was trans. So yeah, Jesus was queer as fuck. So
yeah,
the masculine and the feminine, again, I think that model of how we can exist in the world, in this reality, is what Jesus provides. And you both very eloquently put it. So I thank you so much for being with me today. We've gone way past what you
Yeah.
said. So
It's all
I
good.
appreciate it so much. But one last question, fun question before we go. I'm just curious for people like me who have experienced Reiki at different levels. Mine's mostly been on TikTok. So to go back to what you said, Martha, about people coming at you, I've seen the comments before when people join a TikTok on the hateful things that are being said about the practice or about the practitioner. But my question is, what is the benefit of doing something like this in person? What's the difference between experiencing it like I have on a screen versus experiencing it in person? I mean, it sounds like we've really covered it in terms of the embodiment and being with each other, the emotional release and stuff like that. But I guess just make that part of your shameless promotion.
There
Where
you
can
go.
people follow you or get in contact with you and benefit from your work?
Sure. So virtual and in person, when it comes to the energy, they are the same. The one difference with being in person is that there can be physical touch. And what I mean by physical touch is it is light, it is consensual, it is constantly consented upon,
Mm-hmm.
and it is not necessary. So I will ask my client, hey, sometimes light touch on the shoulders, the wrists, the feet and ankles, maybe the back of the neck can
Mm-hmm.
be incredibly healing
Mm-hmm.
because they've never received gentle touch in that
Right.
way. And there are times where I've said to a client, like, I'm being, may I touch the top of your head? And then they say yes. And I say, actually, no, you were supposed to say no and see that I will respect that. Let's try this again.
Mm-hmm.
May I touch your top? And she's like, no. And I said, okay. And then
Right.
poof, this huge
Mm-hmm.
emotional release happened.
Nice.
So that's the one major difference is I'm physically in the space with you. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Energetically speaking, for the healing to take place, it doesn't have to be in person. And in fact, there are people who actually go deeper in their catharsis when they're virtual because they feel safer, screen off, muted,
Mm-hmm.
and by themselves. They can go deeper because they don't feel like they have to perform. And I
Right.
love that too. So I think both have their benefits, both have their drawbacks, but energetically speaking, it's available energetically, no
Mm-hmm.
matter where you are in the world and what time it is. It can be there. And so the shameless plug is all people are my people. So
Mm.
no matter where you are in the world, if you are called to work with me, if you feel any sort of inkling of, I wonder, or I'm curious about, reach out to me and I will do my best to be available to you on Instagram. My name is at Martha Medicine Woman, spelled out. And my website is marthamw.com. MW meaning medicine woman, but also it's my initials for Martha Wright. So
Mm-hmm.
Martha M, and just reach out to me. Send me a thing. And here's the thing. I won't pressure anyone to work with me because, again, as we've already said, it's not about me. So I am happy to listen, witness, and support as is best served for spirit and for your highest good. Because part of my prayer that I started to talk about earlier and I didn't finish was that every day I begin work, I say, may what needs to be said, may what needs to be heard, which is a direct quote of Christina Pratt from the Last Mask Center out in Oregon. And she's a podcast called Why Shamanism Now, that she's phenomenal. But those are direct quotes from her, and I loved them. And then I say, may I do my work ethically with integrity for the highest good and co-creative divine flow. And may I release attachment to the outcome. May the way be blessed and may you show me the way. And what I'm saying with that is put myself aside, listen to what the client needs and let God guide and just boof, and then go from there. So if you're feeling called to work with me, please reach out. Please reach out.
Yeah,
How about you,
absolutely.
Kristy?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I was going to say I really, as a nervous system educator, I do one-on-one 9D breath work online. For me, energy is in the quantum field. So just like Martha says, time and space don't really exist. It's intention. So when I do any sort of energy work or prayer, that becomes my intention. I can envision that human and not necessarily asking like for my will to be done, right? It's acceptance. It's acceptance of surrender and the beautiful allowance of the remembering. That's usually my intentionality. But it's Martha, your prayer that you say is very awesome and beautiful. And that is very funny because I use this prayer of Saint Francis every morning. Lord, let me be an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love, injury, pardon, doubt, faith, sadness, joy. So it's very similar in that energetic, you know. So working with me is believing in co-regulation. So I love to be in person for that reason, because my nervous system co-regulates your nervous system. And so a lot of ways there's safety and understanding, oh, I can breathe out with this human, you know. So that really becomes a matter of talking through what your next steps are and what may be what your nervous system is needing right now, as
Mm,
far as not energy work or is it body work. But my touch is very similar. It's consent is constant, and sometimes even when we're doing body work, I am asking, because of certain levels of trauma, if I can move my hands yet. You give permission. I'm on your head. Do I have permission to move here? And sometimes, yes, it's really slow, but what we're doing is honoring consent, and we're actually honoring sovereignty. Like,
mm,
nope, I don't want you to do that. Awesome. Awesome. Good job. Right? Where can I put my hand? Right on my left hand. Okay, awesome. And sometimes that's the tears, like Martha was saying, is
hmm.
that permission, permission.
Right.
And that's how I approach body work in a lot of ways, especially moving forward. My business is called Impact Wellness Solutions. And what that is, it's an embodiment of wellness that doesn't just provide solutions that may not work. It's like impact is the most important thing that my business is founded on. Like, I would love a solution to actually have impact, not just be an answer to a question. That's for now. It's for your journey. So it's impactwellnessva.com. And I have in it, virtual discovery calls and all of that if anyone wants to know more about the embodiment work we do, or the 9D breath work that I do. Um, that's really that's how you find me. Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent.
Thank you for having us, Joey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this has
Thank
been
you so
amazing.
much. It was a fantastic conversation. Love what you have to say. Support the work that you're doing. We'll definitely promote. And I'd love to have you back too, especially I'm trying to manifest. I want to get my friend Shalene Kendrick on again, shout out. But specifically, Kristy, her story of Jesus at the well, the way
Hmm.
that she tells that from a neurobiological perspective, so fantastic. So
Oh, I hear
if you
that.
have a chance, she's on Substack right now, but she's got some very good interviews out with different people. I think they're posted on the Substack, but Shalene Kendrick, PhD, neuroscience, neurobiology is her thing. But I'd love to have you back to talk with her so that we can actually connect a lot of dots about, what's happening in our energetic self as these things are going on, but or just by yourselves anytime you're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Joey.
Yeah.
What an honor this was. Thank you.
Thank you very much.